So
Awesome.
approve.
So now it's fun because now we get to both
This
work
is so
together,
cool. Yeah,
right?
this is so cool.
It's awesome. Um, so yeah, I'm just going to give you a brief overview of the core facility and what we do to maintain the instruments and when we turn it on and all that, and then we'll get you started with the operation, okay? So Monday through Friday, the core facility comes in. We turn on every instrument, whether it's a sorter or an analyzer. Every single instrument under our operation, we go ahead and turn on and clean in QC. If it is before 10 a.m. that you have to use an instrument, any holiday or weekend or anything like that, we want to make sure that you're comfortable and able to turn the instrument on and to clean in QC so that you're ready to go. So we do go through that process today just so that you're aware of how to do it. But if you're using it just under normal business day, like normal Monday through Friday, within the working hours of the facility, you don't need to worry about this, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up our website. So if we open up Chrome, if you go to fccf.mskcc.org, what we have on here is we have the SOP to start up or for the operation of the CytoFLEX for startup, QC, and shutdown. So if I go to education and training and handouts, you can see any of the instruments that we have. We have documents for each one. And this is actually a short list right now. We have a bunch more documents that we're expanding on. It's just, it's a long to review everything. So we'll be updating these in the near future. So for the CytoFLEX, what we have is we have the daily startup, QC, and shutdown. And we also have a forward and side scatter settings, okay? So when I open up the daily startup, QC, and shutdown, this is going to be the bulk of what we're working with today. And you have to forgive me because I'm on a trackpad, so sometimes my my movements might not seem so smooth. Okay.
No worries.
Okay, thank you. All right, cool. So first thing we want to do, and this is, you know, regardless of whether or not you have to turn the instrument on, I always want you to check this anyway because it's best practice. I want you to check that the sheath fluid is full and that the waste is empty. So what you're going to see in this SOP is that it's saying if the sheath needs to be replaced, there are full sheath containers located next to the instrument. And this little image right there is what that fluid looks like, right? So what you'll notice is as you're looking at the instrument just to the left, there's going to be a box of sheath. And then right behind it is a box which says waste. The waste has yellow tubing coming outside of it. Do you see both of those?
Yep.
Okay. Now, you'll also notice that those two are actually at the same height as the instrument. So it's very important that we don't move to be either higher or lower. Luckily for us, there's really no space for that, right, Shruthy? Because, you know, we're in New York City, so there's no space for us to move it. Our real estate is very tight. So, so we always leave it on that table, that same area. But if you do need to change it, what you'll notice is that right underneath the instrument, there's going to be a backup, and there are going to be backup containers. So all you'd have to do is unscrew the probe that's there, lift it out, and then replace it with fresh sheath, okay? So and then the waste that's right behind it, if that's full, you unscrew that and then empty all of the contents down the drain.
Down the drain, okay.
And then you have to add 1 liter of bleach before you put it back on. So you put that same waste container back on after you add 1 liter of bleach. And the reason that we do that is we need to make sure that once it's full, it's at least 10% bleach, and that it has an activation time, and an inactivation time, I'm sorry, of at least 30 minutes, so we can make sure whatever's in there is now decontaminated, okay? So what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you just go and lift those up and make sure everything's okay.
Yeah, the sheet feels pretty full.
Yep, perfect.
Waste is relatively empty, not full.
Perfect. That's just what you want, okay? And then the last thing I'm just going to go over before we move on out of this section is, you know, when you look under the instrument and you see that there's that backup sheath fluid, if you're ever in a circumstance where there is no backup, don't worry, okay? All that it is on the CytoFLEX is 10 liters of DI water. So you just need to measure out 10 liters of DI water from the Pure Lab system that's in the lab, that's right by the sink. And then what you'll see right above you on that shelving unit, there's going to be like 50 mil conical tubes that should say antimicrobial. So
Yeah.
there's a couple
Yep.
of, so all you have to do is add one of those. They're pre-aliquoted out into that tube or into the, I'm sorry, the sheath box, and then you're
Okay.
good to go.
Okay. So
So
it's just DI water mixed
exactly.
with the antimicrobial. Okay.
Yep. Perfect. And the only reason we add that antimicrobial, it's actually like an eye wash preservative that we add in there, but
Oh,
it works
interesting.
well for us to make sure that we don't get any growth in the lines and we don't have any contamination in there. Okay. Perfect. So next, what we're going to do is we're going to open up the software. So that's, you know, there's going to be one or two other things I have to physically show you,
Mm-hmm.
but for the most part, everything now is controlled through the software. Okay.
Okay.
So you already made sure the computer was logged in with your ID number and your PI's last name. Be
Mm-hmm.
mindful that that is what we use to track usage. So that's unique to you, and only someone who's been trained by the facility will be able to go ahead and use it,
Mm.
use the instrument, right? And they would get their own credentials. So
Mm.
you want to make sure that whoever's logged in an iLab and booked on the instrument is the same person that logs in with their ID number and all of that to be able to use the instrument. If not, we can run into some issues with billing. So we just want to make sure that you don't have that issue. Okay.
Okay.
So from there, we're going to open up that Site Expert software. So the Site Expert desktop icon looks just like this. So we're going to open that up. And once we open that up, we're just going to check to make sure the instrument's on and connected. So all of this right here is telling us exactly what to look for if we're ever in a scenario where you're starting it up on your own. But I'm going to minimize that, and I'm going to have you go ahead and open up that software. And can you remind me if you've had flow experience prior to this?
Yeah, I have used the BD fax caliber machines before for flow analysis
Okay,
in
that's
my
great.
PhD. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. It's going to be a little different. It's going to be easier for you to work around the software, I think, and the instrument itself is very straightforward. So it should be all good.
Yep. So it
So
says connected.
exactly. You're a pro. You already pulled out where that is. That's awesome. So it's connected. It's also in standby mode, and it gives you like a timestamp of when that occurred. So it gave us that status update at 2:53.
253.
Exactly. Perfect. And then the other thing we need to look for, Shruti, is at the bottom right, you see that the sheath is giving that green circle, and so is the waist. There's there's sensors on those probes to tell us if the sheath is going too low or if the waist is going too high.
Oh, wow, that's amazing.
It's awesome, right? Now, I want you to hear what it sounds like just so you can get an idea. It's definitely very audible. It's definitely super loud. So I just want you to go over and unscrew the cap of that sheath fluid and lift it out just so that you can hear it. And once you hear it, you're good to go ahead and put it back in place. And it's definitely something you're going to hear. There
Yep,
you go.
it's beeping.
So you'll get that error message. And when you go back, or not error message, you'll get that sound. Now, when you go back to watch this video, if you pay attention and do watch this video, what you'll see is there'll be a mute alarmer option. So it gives us in the software an option to mute the alarmer. You don't
Mm.
need to worry about that now. If you
Mm.
were running a sample and you
Mm.
wanted to, say, all right, I need to make sure I get through this sample, you could mute
Mm.
the alarmer, finish that sample, and then swap it out.
Okay.
So it's just so that your ears don't start bleeding. Right?
Okay, makes
It's so
sense.
loud. Yeah. Um, the other thing that we need to look for in the software is what the sample delivery mode is. So
Mm.
the beautiful thing about the CytoFLEX is it has a really great plate loader. So in addition to tube mode, you have the option to run in plate mode. The
Mm.
default mode on the instrument is tube mode,
Okay.
but the plate loader on it is very good. And what we need to do is we need to make sure that in the software itself, it's in that correct mode, okay? So you see just next to the sheath icon, it tells us it's in semi-automatic sampler.
Yes.
That means it's in tube mode. So
Okay.
the two different modes that it could be is it's either going to be the semi-automatic sampler or it's going to be a plate loader. Those are the two options. So in addition to what it says on the software, we also need to make sure that on the instrument itself, when we're looking at the instrument straight forward, there's going to be a switch. So there's a tube plate switch. And as I'm scrolling down here, you see this little piece right there?
Yep.
Now, if you look at it from the side, just like that, you probably see the P facing you.
E. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's from the side. So I want you to look at it straight forward. Like, just like that, exactly. And when you look, if you kind of lean down a little bit because of the angling,
Oh, yeah.
the
I
T
see
is
what you
facing
mean.
you, right?
It's a T. Yeah. The T is
Exactly.
facing me if I sit this way. Like the
Exactly.
machine is here.
Yes. So when you look at it straight forward, you got it. Exactly. We need to make sure that T is facing us when we're
Okay.
looking straight at it.
Okay.
Because what winds up
Oh
happening.
man, I'm glad you're recording it because I didn't bring my notebook.
No,
So
that's
this is
that's
helpful.
quite all right. And if you want to grab a piece of paper and a pen, if you like taking notes, feel free to do that. But we do have this recorded. We have the SOP, and also just because we have this first session, if you want another session after this, we can 100% do that.
Okay.
So don't feel pressured like this is the only session we're going to have. We can always do a backup. Okay. And 1 second, real quick. Okay, great. So sorry about that. I have another member, another team member is doing another training. I wanted to make sure I wasn't interrupting her.
Okay.
So, you know, it's important that we check this plate tube switch and also what's in the software, because there's actually two different probes. So if you can imagine, like, you have your instrument, you have a probe here to go into the plate, and then you have a probe here to go into your tube. And there's a valve up in by the flow cell that will control whether or not it's taking sample up from the tube or the plate. And if you have the incorrect switch selected, that means the valve is going to be closed off to the one that you want to see, and you're not going to see any events. 9.9 times out of 10, Shruthi, what's going to wind up happening is if you don't see anything, it's going to be because that's in the incorrect mode, because someone might have forgot to put it back. So we're all human. We all make mistakes. It does happen. I just want you to be aware of it, and I want you to think, all right, that's the first thing that'll probably happen, or the most likely occurrence here, and why I can't see sample, okay? So your samples are all going to be in tube mode today, right?
Yep.
Okay. So because it's in tube mode now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have us change over to plate mode so that you can get the feel for it. And then we're going to, so I'm going to do it in the software, and I'm going to have you do the switch itself because you're there. And then I want you to change it back to tube mode. This way you get that hands-on practice at it, okay?
Yep.
So it's all kind of written out and spelled out here. But what we're going to do is we're going to go to the cytometer tab. We're going to go to sample injection mode. And I'm going to switch it to plate loader. You can ignore manual like it doesn't exist. Okay.
Okay.
So I'm going to go to plate loader. You can hear it's doing some stuff in there on the instrument itself. And it's going to come up with this, this text box saying the sample loading mode has been reset to restart the cytometer and connect the appropriate probe. So I'm going to say, okay. And then I'm going to hit, so after I select okay, we're going to go to cytometer, and I'm going to turn it off. And then what you would do, you can hear the instrument power down.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're going to switch that or reorient that switch so that the P is facing you. And you can feel it's just going to be a gentle movement, like you shouldn't have to force it, and then you'll see the P facing you. I believe it's perfect. You are a pro. And then I'm going to go to cytometer, and I'm going to go to turn on. And it takes about like 30 seconds to a minute for it to connect and to go into standby mode. And you can see in the bottom left of the software, it's turning on. Yep. And then what you're also going to see when it connects and it's in standby is that it's in plate loader mode, right? So we would see the P facing us, and we'd also see the plate loader, and that's just what we want. So once it goes into standby, Shruthi, what I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and switch over to tube mode. So just what I just did, we're going to have you do the same thing, but just revert back to tube. Okay. And it takes, like I said, about that 30 seconds to a minute. So when you see that blinking light, you didn't do anything wrong by checking, like by clicking cytometer. It just doesn't give you the option to do anything yet. So even if you click it, it's
now
fine.
it stopped blinking.
Yeah. Exactly. Perfect.
So here we go to semi-automatic.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then we
Hit
need to
okay.
restart the cytometer. So
Exactly.
go to cytometer, turn off.
Uh-huh. And then
So
once
it's
you do
turned
that,
off.
uh-huh.
Then manually move the valve
Yep.
to T. Then go to cytometer, turn on.
Exactly. And now you are a pro
And then,
at switching from tube to plate and plate to tube.
yay! It's pretty intuitive and you're
Yes.
helping out and it's actually working out great. I'm becoming a fan of virtual trainings. It's so good.
Yeah, it is nice. I mean, there are some things that you miss from other, or that I miss from in-person trainings, like having that, that in-person conversation and being able to show stuff. But if anything, this works out nice because we have the recording of it, and you can
Exactly.
also, we can talk through things, and I think sometimes it gives you a better understanding when we're talking through it so detailed. Okay.
And like you can control my screen, so
Yes,
that's awesome.
it is fun. Um, it's
All
cool to
right,
be
so
able
now it
to.
stopped blinking. So I'm just gonna go back to cytometer, sample injection mode. Oh,
Yep,
it's
so that's already
semi-automatic.
good.
Got it.
So you did that. So now you're
Yep.
set. So
Okay,
now you're
that's
perfectly set. Now I'm going to go back to that SOP and we're going to go to our next step.
okay.
And our next step here is telling us that we want to make sure we do the system startup program. So it's
Mm-hmm.
cytometer and system startup program. And it has us go ahead and load some water. Now, this is required by the first person of the day who turns on the instrument. Anyone else does not have to do it. So because we're training and because our time is kind of precious to go through and run your samples and understand the instrument, I'm going to show you how to do it, but we're not actually going to execute it because that would be a very boring 8 minutes for you. And there wouldn't be too much for us to talk about. And
Okay.
it's already been done. So it could
Okay.
be kind of a waste of resources.
Okay.
So what I'm going to have you do is go up to the cytometer tab up top. And we're going to go and do the system startup program. So when you click on it, it doesn't automatically start. It just tells you it wants you to put the tube with 2 mils of DI water on the sample loader. So if you hit that initialize button right there, go ahead and click that. And what you'll see is the little tube holder is going to pop out from the sample station. Right?
Yeah, it did.
So it popped out. If you were to have taken that and pulled it out yourself and put the tube in, it's fine. It doesn't break anything. It doesn't do anything. But
Okay.
when you hit initialize, it automatically pops out for you. So you could just do that. So if you were to actually be turning the instrument on and completing this, all you do is load that tube of water on and hit start. Now, you might say, all right, well, where do I find the tube of water? Right behind you on the two desks that are pushed together, there's going to be beakers and there's going to be centrifuge. And on that table, we'll have 5 mil polystyrene tubes. You might have to look around a little bit, but do you see how there's the centrifuge on that
Yeah,
table?
yeah, I see the centrifuge.
There are going to be like three beakers, like plastic beakers behind that. One's going to have transfer pipettes. One's going to have
Oh yeah, I see that.
taps.
Hmm.
Exactly.
And
And
tubes. So I just fill one of these tubes up with water.
exactly. If you ever need a tube for anything, you can just grab it from there. Okay.
Oh,
And
nice.
we also have squirt bottles. By most of the analyzers, you'll have a yellow cap one that's Fax Clean, which is essentially bleach. You'll have a green cap one, which is essentially like a detergent or rinse, and then you have one for water. Okay.
Okay, I don't see these guys though. Yeah, on the machine.
So yeah, so those are going to be like at each workstation. That we share them across the Fortessas and
Oh, okay.
Cytoflex. So they're
Oh,
not
okay. I see it by another machine. Yeah, I know what
exactly.
you're talking
So you could just take one of those if you needed it. We don't need it
about.
now,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
that's where you'd grab it from. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I see it. Cool.
And this is just so that you're prepared because we don't
Yeah, yeah.
need to do it today, but actually towards the end of your session when we're cleaning, we'll utilize that. Okay.
Okay, perfect.
All right. So back at the instrument, we'll pretend like we did the system startup and that it finished. So go ahead and hit close. Perfect. And then back to the SOP, what it's going to tell us to do is that it's going to tell us that we need to do QC. So the QC we are going to do today because I want you to get the feeling for how it goes and what to look for and everything. It's very straightforward. So everything that's here, I'm going to walk through with you. But it's telling us essentially to go to the QC option in the software, make sure it's the correct configuration and lot number, and hit start. There is one error in this SOP that needs to be corrected, and it's about the configuration that we choose. I'm going to show you in the software why it's incorrect, and it's going to be very intuitive to you as to why it's incorrect, okay? All right. So in the software, what we're going to do is you're going to go to the QC standardization icon option up top and hit start, exactly. And when you do that, it opens up this window where we have all of our QC results. So you can see for the most part, everything looks okay, right? There was an IR QC bead that was run on the 4th that didn't look so great. But what winds up happening, and that's an important note, is that this instrument's it's a 7 laser instrument. So it has a 355 laser, 405, 488, 561, 640, and 808. It's actually 6 laser. So that 808 laser, it's the IR laser. And that one, the QC beads that we use for the rest of the lasers do not work for the IR because it's a very specific type of bead that needs to have that excitation and emission range. So if you were to ever need to use the 808 nanometer laser, you let me know and I'll walk you through how to do the QC, but it's very straightforward if you need to do it. It's just a different set of beads, that's all.
And so these are all the different colors you can measure in this machine?
Exactly. So these are all the different detectors, and how it's kind of named. You're used to another instrument where maybe you'd have multiple labels per detector, where you could choose FTSE or GFP or Flex. Here, because we can only choose one name per detector, what we chose to do to name it is to say, all right, it's blue is the excitation source, so it's the blue laser, and 525 is the emission that we're collecting, or the midpoint of emission. So when we go into our website, what we have under services and instruments, and this is also an iLab, which is more straightforward probably for you, we have the configurations for every single instrument in our facility, okay? So we have all of that here, and what you'll see is the optical configuration for the CytoFLEX. If I click on that, it's going to tell us, okay, for the blue 525 or B525, if I look at that, that's FTSE, GFP, Alexa fluoridate. That's the detector I'd use for those fluorochromes. All right. Now, I'm going to go back to that in a little bit because I'll help you pick, once we set up your actual experiment, which detectors to use. But this will be a really nice tool for you, okay?
Yeah.
All right. So coming back here, this is absolutely right. Those are all of our detectors, right? And then what you'll see is, as far as the configuration goes, if I choose default configuration, there's no QC results, right? So I'm like, oh, you know what? That makes sense that that's not the correct one. So you're actually never going to change that configuration. We're always going to leave it as is, and we just have to modify that SOP, okay? So what I need you to do now is I'm going to walk you through where it is. I need you to go and grab the QC beads so that we can run the QC. So what you'll see right in the middle of the room, there's a half fridge, so it's a short fridge. And if you go ahead and take a look at the short fridge, it should be right about where you're at, I think.
I found it.
Perfect. It's kind of like playing Where's Waldo in our lab. You just open up the door, and there should be a red box on the door, and it's red and white, and it should say CytoFLEX
Daily QC Fluorospheres.
Exactly. You're golden. Okay. So we'll take that back to the instrument with us, and typically in that box we'll have beads that are already diluted, and they should be labeled with the lot number and the name, and ideally the date they were created.
Yes.
Exactly. Okay. So does it have a lot number on there?
No lot number, but there is a date, 29 August.
Okay. So there should also be the lot number, but if you needed to double check, what you can do is look at the actual box itself and open up and kind of look in there, and you should see a vial of the stock. And that should have the lot number written on the side. I believe it's AM03.
Yeah, it's AM.
Okay, perfect. So if you were to ever be out of beads and you needed to, or if there was ever a situation you came into where the tube wasn't made up, what you could do is use that vial that you just pulled out, you vortex it, and then what you wind up doing, it tells you right in the SOP, is you just do 3 drops of those beads with 1 ml of DI water into a 5 ml tube. You label it with the lot number and the date, okay? So that's all you need to do, but these are already created. So what we'll do in the
And
software,
is this enough for today? Like
can you
the
hold it a
volume?
little closer to your phone? I'm gonna, yeah, that's, oh, actually, yeah, that's okay. That should be all right. Yeah,
Maybe 200 microliters.
yeah, that should be fine. We're probably gonna replenish that on Monday.
Okay.
All right, so what you're gonna do is you're gonna go ahead and vortex that and give it a good mix. Okay, and then what we're going to do is in the software where it says lot number, you're going to hit the toggle, select the toggle down, and we're going to choose AM03. Okay, and then what we're going to do is you're going to load that on the sample station with the cap off exactly, and then we're just going to hit start.
There. Okay, start.
Exactly, you got it. It's going to give us this error message because it's going to say, hey, just so you know, I can do this for every other parameter, but I can't do it for the infrared ones. And you're going to say, I know, I don't care. And you're going to hit yes. So then what it does in QC is it goes ahead, it goes and it checks the laser power for all the individual lasers in the unit, which is a really nice tool that Beckman has built into this. And then from there, after it checks to make sure all the lasers are at the appropriate range, it goes ahead and it loads the sample and it's checking to make sure that the laser delay is appropriate. So the laser delay, if you're not familiar, it's when the lasers are spatially separated and it needs to make sure that the time delay between the lasers are correct. It's checking for that. And then it's also going to be, when we load the sample, what we're going to see is we're going to see the beads pop up right here, just like we are now. And it's going to be adjusting the flow rate to get the appropriate events per second. And what we should start seeing is these nice tight peaks by fluorescence. So you can see that we have all these dot plots and there's a really tight peak. It almost just looks like a tiny speck of dust on the instrument. That's actually ideal because we want to have nice tight CVs. So it's checking to make sure that the CVs, or the coefficient of variation, they're nice and tight. It's also checking to make sure that the target values, because these are beads that should have the same, should be hitting the same point from day to day. It's checking to make sure that those are at the same point, and that it's not moving too much, and that the gains that are adjusted so that the signal hits a certain point aren't having to shift too much. So
compared to like previous measurements, previous days QCs. Oh, wow. Okay.
Yep. So it's doing all of that for us in an automated fashion. And then that gives you confidence, Shruthi, that when you're running your sample, that you can be confident in the results, right? You always still want to have the appropriate biological controls and technical controls for your experiment, but this gives you confidence that the instrument is working as it should be, okay? Now, you might run into a scenario where it fails, and there are a couple of different things that could happen, right? So we have that listed out in the SOP. So what can wind up happening is if the sampling rate is less than 100, you can try preparing a new tube of beads, and that's perfectly fine to do, and make sure you vortex them, right? But the other thing is, what I always want you to check for early on is to make sure that that sampling mode is correct, both on the switch and in the instrument software, because that is usually what happens, okay? The other thing is if the CVs are broad, and you could tell that because if that happened, you would see the values would be individual red X's for whatever detector it was. So if you're seeing a couple of CVs that are above the target, so you can see here there's a target value of 5 or 7 for all of them. If all of them are pretty much higher, what we can probably do and guess and assume is that the instrument might be a little dirty still. So you have 2 options. What you can do is you can go to cytometer and put it in standby. And then from there, you can either prime the instrument or put it in a deep clean. So if you prime it, it kind of replenishes all the fluids in the instrument
Mm.
in case there's any maybe partial clogs or anything like that. But then for more stubborn scenarios where you might have a little bit of a deeper clog or a little bit of a deeper dirty unit, by selecting Deep Clean, there is a solution of contrad in the instrument. And when you select Deep Clean, it's going to say, "Are you sure you want to do this?" You're going to say yes. And it takes the contrad, which is a strong detergent, and it soaks all the lines in that instrument, okay?
And that's inside the machine. Like I don't have to provide that.
Exactly.
Okay.
So there's never any manual interventions you have to do, okay? Now, it's kind of like soaking your dishes in detergent.
Got it.
So if I'm very, very guilty of this, where I might bake something or I might cook something and burn it, and then I really need to let it sit in the sink with some
Yeah.
soap for a while so that it comes off easy. It's the same concept, just with your cells. That's all. So those are the two things I want you to do if you have an issue where it fails. Very importantly, though, you'll see that there's a sign posted on the left, like the right panel of the instrument. So right kind of in front of the, or behind the vortex, right there, like by where your phone is, and it's going to say remote troubleshooting.
Mm-hmm.
There's an email on there. It's skifccf@gmail.com.
Mm-hmm.
And what we do is we monitor that email. And if it's a holiday or a weekend, I can't guarantee someone's available. Or if it's 3 a.m., right? As much as I love Flow, I might not be able to answer at 3 a.m. because I'll be sleeping. But if you run into issues, regardless of time, I just want you to reach out to us and let us know. And if someone is available, we can reach out to you via Zoom on this platform and try and help you out remotely to get everything settled. Okay?
That's amazing. Thank you.
No problem. We recognize that you guys do a lot of hard work and we want to support you as much as possible. Okay. Now, the other thing I just want to mention briefly before we exit out of QC and get started with your experiment is that you'll notice that we have these target values for CV. So say the target's 5 and your RCV on one detector is 5.1 or 6.
Okay.
I want you to think, 1, do I need that parameter in my experiment? So say it was on the UV 675. Do I need
Mm-hmm.
this detector? And is this the only detector it's happening on? If not, like if you don't need it and it's the only one, just proceed, it's fine, and send us an email and let us know. Now, if you see it on a detector that you would need, right? So say you needed the blue 525, which would be the same as it would be like the same detector for FTSE, and say you needed that. If that CV was 5.1 or 6, I'd say don't worry about it, go ahead and run. If that CV was 20, I'd say do not run. There might be an issue and your data might not be correct. The other thing to keep in mind is what's the application, right? If you're running cell cycle, which cell cycle data is linear, and we're looking for nice tight CVs to be able to pull out populations, if you've ever seen cell cycle data by flow, you want a nice tight CV so that your data is nice and tight for your cells. So these are all things to keep in mind and be mindful of, but if you ever have questions, always reach out to us, okay?
Okay.
So then now that we can say this QC has been done, so go ahead and hit file and
So if
yeah.
the RCV turns out to be like 200 instead of 5, then in the channel that I want to measure, then what do I do?
So in that case, what I want you to do is do a cytometer standby and prime.
Okay. Oh yeah.
And then after
Or
the
the deep
prime
clean.
or deep clean and try it again. If it doesn't work after that, send us an email, let us know. We'll try and walk you through it. But if you're still getting those results and the CVs are very, very broad like that, once they start getting to double digits, I'd be concerned. All right, because you can see they're all well with under 5. And that's what we want to see. Okay, if you were to see something like 200, I'd be concerned the laser itself was off. Okay. All right, so now that QC stuff is done, we can go ahead and hit file and close QC standardization.
Shall I
And
go
then,
put the beads back in the fridge?
Yep, that was gonna be the next step. So you could do that now.
Sorry.
And then, no, don't be sorry at all. You're doing really wonderful.
So yeah, I'm back.
Okay, great. So then you could just hit file and close the QC standardization.
How do I close this?
If you go to File, right up top on the left, and then close QC
Oh,
standardization.
yeah.
Okay, perfect. Now we're ready to kind of go ahead and start our experiment, right? So from my understanding, right, you just have the one fluorochrome, right?
So I have, yeah, FITC. It's an assay for apoptosis. So it's annexin 5 conjugated to FITC.
Okay,
And I've also stained my cells with propydium iodide as a viability dye.
perfect. And you also have the single colors, right?
Yeah,
Okay, awesome. So this is great because we're going to be able to go through compensation today,
yeah.
because you have your single colors, right? Now, it's going to be a little bit different than what you're used to. So a little bit of a warning, because on the Site Expert software, what we have to do is we have to do compensation separately from experiment, and then we import those values into your experiment. So just a different way of thinking about things, but it still works perfectly fine, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to start off with new compensation.
So irrespective of any experiment, I always have to bring my single color controls for this machine because
Yes.
you always start with compensation.
Yeah, and whenever that's actually applicable across any instrument, what I'd always recommend and ask people to do is to run their single colors, because what happens, Shruti, we can, like, we just saw it in when we're running QC, there are target values and the gains have to be adjusted. When I say gains, it's similar to what you're used to with voltages on the other instruments, because, and the terminology is slightly different, because what we use for signal amplification on this instrument are APDs, avalanche photodiodes. You've probably heard PMTs before, photomultiplier tubes.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very, very similar concept that carries out the same thing essentially. It's just more linear. And PMTs are like this big, and then APDs are like this big. They're kind of like the size of a pin. And they're also a bit, from my understanding, I think that might be a little cheaper also. So that's how we fit so much into a tiny little box, those APDs, okay? So we're going to go ahead and hit new compensation, perfect. And it has us go ahead and tell it where we want to put it. So where it says up top on the file path documents and site expert data, if you can click on site expert data, and that's right up, I'm going to show you with the mouse if it's okay.
Yeah.
So you see where I'm hovering right now?
Mm-hmm.
If you click on that, I like to keep everyone's stuff in their individual file folders as opposed to separating it out. So in here, I'll have you just create a folder. Okay, and then from there, what I'm going to have you do under file name where it says comp 2020 and all of that.
Should I make a folder called compensation or?
You don't have to. I typically tend to keep everything just in that one folder.
Okay.
And if you're happy with that name, you can leave it. If you want to change it, you can. Perfect. Okay, and then hit save. Okay, awesome. Now what we need to do at this point is we need to go ahead and we need to choose which detectors we're using for your experiment. So you're using the annexin, FITC, and then PI.
Yeah.
So I already kind of, I said it quite a bit already that the FITC is going to be off that blue
Blue
525.
25. Yeah.
And then for PI, do you have any idea what it might be off of? If not, there's nothing.
Texas red. I think it's Texas red,
Yeah,
but I don't know what that is
that's
in
perfectly
terms of
fine.
wavelength.
Yeah, that is perfectly fine because I actually get to use this as an opportunity to show you some different tools if you're okay with it. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to open up Chrome. Oops, sorry, I got too click happy. And when we come in here, when we have the instrument configuration, right, what you'll see is it actually tells us right here, PE Texas Red, so you're absolutely right, PI, M Cherry, RFP, and that's off the yellow-green 610. Every once in a while you might run into a scenario where it's not on this list. So people might be running random fluorochromes that are new or that are very obscure that might not be on here. In that case, all we have to do is just check it. So if we go ahead and put in like Cytox blue excitation emission, for example. And that's just in my head because someone emailed me about running that today.
Mm.
What you can see is typically you'll see something like this where you have the images and everything like that. What I prefer doing is I actually prefer going to fluorescent spectra viewer. Okay. And I like opening that up. And there's plenty available. It's not just from thermo, right? But if we type in PI here and start looking down, all right,
Mm.
presidium iodide. Oh, on the blue laser, I'm not really seeing much, right? It's giving us the output right here. If I change this to a UV laser, a little bit. If I change it to the yellow-green, a little bit more, right? So it is something that's unique in the sense that PI is very bright and you don't need that, like the maximal excitation to pull the signal out. But you can start looking at this and say, all right, I know the emission because the dashed line is the excitation. The emission is somewhere between 600 and 650, right? So if I come back here and look at this filter, 61020. That's right in that.
Closely matches it. Yeah.
Exactly. And you can even type that in if you wanted to. And I just love showing people this because it's one of my favorite things to do. And that's really making me sound nerdy because I kind of am.
No, it's awesome.
Yeah, but it's a really awesome tool, just like you're saying, like it's for us to be able to understand why we're looking at what filters. And just a very brief explanation. When it says 61020, what that means is that 610 is the midpoint and 20 is the range. So it's taking light for a 61020 from 600 nanometers to 620.
620.
Exactly.
Yep.
You are golden. Be careful we don't try and steal you.
I did a lot of flow. I mean, I don't know too much, but I did a lot of flow for my PhD. So
No, that's a good thing. We'll be happy to see on the core more and more then. So we're going to use that yellow-green 610 then, Shruti. So
I
here,
have a question. Can
yes.
we, on this same, so I'm liking this conceptual discussion, can we do this practice for another experiment I'm planning to do next week? So using the same website that you pointed out.
Yeah, of
Because
course.
remember I emailed you a rather confusing question about using TD tomato and another red dye
And
in the
far
same
red.
sample. Yeah,
Yes.
it's far red. So I just wanted to see if it's there on this website as
Yeah.
well.
So let's go ahead. Let me X out of all this stuff and I'll let you go ahead. So I'll put add filter because it's going to be a custom, right? So you go ahead and search for those fluorophores.
Okay. That's the name of the reagent. It's probably not present.
Cypher 5E. I've never heard of that one. As you're searching for that, I'm still here. I'm going to look on my computer as well.
This one. Sure.
Is it the NHS ester?
Yeah.
This is good. I like a nice challenge. Cyanine dye derivative. I will bet you it's very similar to Cy5.
It's probably, yeah. I think so.
So the excitation is 644, the emission 6. Oh, we're on the same exact website, and I was just on the. Okay. So I wonder if we type it in Cypher 5E
Here?
excitation emission. I'm typing it in my. Yeah, I don't think we're probably not going to have it.
But maybe sci-fi is the same thing.
It's probably very similar, but if we know that the excitation max is around 640 and the emission 660, what we know, even if we don't have this specific
Dye,
spectrum,
we at least, we can figure out which filter to use.
exactly. So if
If
it's
it's
6, yeah.
663, then we go here.
Uh-huh.
644 is probably going to be excited here. No.
Yeah. Oh, well,
And
633 was the excitation, I think, right?
Yeah, 644 is the excitation. No.
I think
Yeah, 644.
644 is the emission. let me double check that because I don't want to be wrong. I'm just going to go back to that document, the specs.
Oh, it's on my screen as
Oh,
well.
so oh yeah, you're right. You were absolutely right. 644 and 633. So 633 is going to be the closest to that, absolutely. And then
So that,
660.
and then 660 will be the closest for
Exactly.
the. Oh, so yay! So TD tomato is here. So that means
Yep.
I can actually detect these two separately.
Exactly. And there's going to be a little bit. So if you go back to that fluorescent spectra viewer, Shruti, what you'll see, if you type in TD tomato, you can also see that the excitation is different, right? So you're getting, at least you can see here for TD tomato, the excitation is going to be off the yellow-green laser, right? And you're probably going to have a little bit of cross laser excitation because even when you don't see it on these spectra viewers, these are just tools, but the real way to see it is going to be on the instrument, right? So if I could take, well, actually, you know what I'll do? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to, can you hit print screen on the keyboard for me? Okay. Now this is also something I love doing. It brings me back to like middle school. I don't know about you, but I used to do this all the time. Did it work? Can you hit Control V for me? Huh, it didn't work. Let's try.
I didn't print screen. I mean, print screen.
Oh, okay.
I did Windows P. Was that
Oh,
it?
okay. That might not work because it's on a there should be a little print screen button on the keyboard. And this might be a little silly. I might not have to do this, but I think it might be cool to show you.
Is it the one next to the Windows? Let me
It
see.
might be PRTSCRN. I think.
Oh yeah, I think I see it.
You see it? Okay.
I hit it.
Perfect. So go back to paint. Then we'll do paste. See? Perfect.
Oh,
So
I've never done this. Sweet.
yeah, it's awesome. I like using Max because you can actually do a specific
Screenshot. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's also a snagging tool on here, but essentially what's going to wind up happening is your excitation for the other one is going to be something like this, right?
Yeah, close to 644. Yeah.
Exactly. And then you're going to have something like this.
For my emission, yeah.
Or that was probably a little bit,
Yeah.
but it could be something like that, right? So because the excitation source is different and also because the emission is different, and we know that we have that filter set up for that Cyphene, whatever the Cyphene 5 NHS, we should be golden for that next experiment that you have to run.
That's awesome. I'm glad to know that.
Yes.
Cool.
So we're good. Okay. So now we can go back.
Okay. Yeah.
And
I just
now,
wanted to talk about that now. We
no,
can
that's
do
great.
the actual experiment.
I'm really glad that we had the opportunity to do that. That's great. So now here, when we do the compensation setup, we typically do compensation on area. And when we're looking at log data, we look at like fluorescent data and log area. So we'll leave it there. And then what I find to be the most useful thing, right, is I will label any of the detectors that I am using, and then I'll uncheck anything that I'm not using. Or alternatively, you can unselect all because you're only using 2.
Yeah.
And then, for example, I would label FITSI and say, all right, this one I'm using. Perfect. And then do the same thing for the yellow green 610 because that's where it's going to have the PI, I believe. Let's just double check that to make sure I'm correct though. Yeah. So that PI is off the yellow green 610.
Or is it 585?
610, I believe.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. No,
This
don't be
is
sorry.
yeah.
You should question me. That's a good thing.
Click that. Label it PI.
And the other thing you see, Shruti, is the sample type, right? So it's asking a
Mm.
cell or bead. The really nice thing about this is that it actually is built in a little bit more of an intuitive way into the software to pull out whether or not your unstained should be beads or cells, because the beads and cells have different autofluorescence, right?
Mm.
And I'm going to use this as a one quick opportunity to show you something else in our website. We have, now that we're done with this, a program called Flow Post-its, and we come out with them every 2 weeks. So if you go to education and training and go to Flow Post-its, we have all these different one-page documents that go into like
Wow.
information on things that are helpful with flow, and like, you know, it's brief so that it's not like a
I
20-page
love
document you
this.
have to read. Awesome. Awesome.
It's like the nerd's paradise.
Yeah.
It's so cool. I love flow cytometry. I love it. So I'm just gonna binge read this.
That is awesome. I love hearing that. I love hearing that. So everyone from the group like really works hard to put a lot of these documents together. And the reason I wanted to bring it up and show you is because one, you appreciate flow, and two, if you click on the autofluorescence and comp one, it shows the importance of choosing the correct negative. Because, for example, here on the left, it's showing us the autofluorescence of beads, which is in orange, and cells, which is in that purple blue color. Oftentimes, what winds up happening is people will mix beads and cells, and they don't account for that in the compensation. So the software is doing the right thing, because it's trying to correct for that spillover, and
Mm.
you know, and match the MFIs of the positive and the negative in that spillover detector. So what you can see here on the right is we have the overlay of a correct negative that was selected and an incorrect negative. And below it, it's also showing us the autofluorescence of that particle type.
Mm.
You can see it's actually correcting appropriately based on what it's been told. So it's 9.9 times out of 10 not an issue with the software or on the instrument. It's usually an issue with what we've told it or the controls themselves. Okay, so that's my little spiel about being careful with your control types. But what I'm assuming is that you have cells for all of your
Only
single
cells. Yeah.
exactly, and you have unstained cells too, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're going to also check off unstained cell, which is the top, perfect, and you don't need a
And I
label for
label.
that one. That's fine. But then, if for any of your single colors you were using beads, all you'd have to do is just switch it over to beads, and that's it. And then it will give us the option to draw in a negative gate around the negative population. Or alternatively, you can also, in addition to running an unstained bead, cell, run an unstained bead. Okay. So we can go ahead now and hit OK. And then I'm going to show you one or two things in the software and we'll get started. Because I'm sure you're sick of hearing me talk and you want to just see your cells at this point.
No, I don't even know if my experiment will work. So it's fun. This is fun.
Well, you know what we'll do? We'll keep the fingers crossed. Hopefully everything works. But if not, it's a great learning experience.
Exactly.
Okay. So a couple of things here. One, you'll probably have noticed, all right, I only picked 2 fluorochromes. Why is everything popping up? It's something that's built into the Site Expert software where it automatically has every detector open. Okay. And it's not something I love because they try saying that you can just add or remove fluorochromes at later dates and not have to run all the single colors. You're a good cytometrist. You know that that's not ideal. I'm a good cytometrist. I hope. I know that that's not ideal. So it's something that they build in, trying to make it a user-friendly instrument, but it's not following the best practices. But that's the reason that we don't have the option to not see all of these parameters, okay? Now, what you'll also see is that the first fluorescent plot will have your first fluorescent parameter, and the second will also have the second, and then after that, it goes in order of wavelength. So even though it's showing all of them, only the ones that you're using are going to be the ones that are up first, okay? The other thing I want you to realize is that right now, the way it's set up, we're looking at 0 to 5 million on forward and side scatter and the scaling. The instrument actually has the capability to look at 0 to 16,777,416, I believe. That's the range. But what winds up happening is the instrument maxes out and saturates in the height of the forward and side scatter at about 4.5, 5 million. So we adjusted it so the default view goes from 0 to 5 million so that you know it's within that range, so we don't have it maxing out by height. Because then it's going to have you're going to have a very hard time gating on singlets, okay? And we still get beautiful resolution in the 0 to 4.5, 5 million range, okay? So this document will give you an explanation on how to adjust that scaling should you need to, but the default is set up like this, right? But if you ever need to, you just click on this little square right there, and this is where you can change those values. Okay. All right, so the other thing I'm going to show you is, you have the option to initialize so that you can get started and run. If we open up the acquisition settings right here, this gives us all of our gains, okay? So the default, someone probably switched this around, but you have recommended and you have default. Someone changed these values slightly, so we're just going to kind of leave it as is. We do have to do a characterization of the instrument because we're going to use characterization of all the other instruments in the facility to make sure that we can pull out where our or get the best resolution between negative. We still have to do that on the CytoFLEX, but we'll just take a look at your samples and make sure that we're getting good resolution. But when in doubt, you can go ahead and go to the default settings, okay? But you'll see the values can be from 1 to 3,000 for gain, and that is a big range. You're going to be very excited in like a minute when we put your sample on because there's a much easier way to adjust where your settings are. So I'm going to put that off to the side. The other thing just to be aware of, events to display, that's controlling how many you see in your plots right there. This is telling you how many events to record. When you're in compensation, you can't choose a gated population, but we can choose to record however many we need from total all events. And you could also choose how much time you want to record and how much volume, right? So you can say either 10,000 or 600 seconds or this number of volume, okay? The sample flow rate's 10, 30, or 60 microliters per minute. We don't use custom because that goes up to 240, and that should only be used for cleaning because that's a insane number to run. But by default, we always start it slow. When we first put your sample on, because we ran some beads, they are pretty sticky. So we're going to see a little bit of those beads popping through on the plot, but we're just going to threshold them out because your cells are going to be much bigger, okay? So I talked a lot. I told you I would. I apologize. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to put your unstained cells on to start. So you're going to give them a vortex. And I should have asked you this really quick before you vortex. Are these human samples or mouse?
This is actually zebrafish melanoma cells.
Oh, okay. So then never mind. So if you ever have the need to run human, we're just asking that everyone fix human samples.
Okay.
But this is zebrafish, that's fine. If you can't fix your human samples and there's some type of an application, you just let me know and I'll walk you through the process of what you can do in case you can't fix, okay? It's either going to be running it in plate mode or making sure that those tubes are in solid caps. And after you vortex, we wait a minute to make sure there's no aerosols. So those solid caps are helpful because the ones that you're using now are great for filtration. But remember, it's 35 micron mesh. So any aerosols that are produced can come out of that and actually cause issues with people breathing them in.
So this is only if it's from human samples, yes, right? What about human cell lines? It's not a problem, right?
Human cell lines, we also want people to fix because they can actually still be infectious.
Oh, okay.
So it's fine. We can still work through it. The most important thing, like I said, solid cap tube. After you vortex, wait a full minute. Okay. So I would typically recommend, if you're doing that, just vortex a couple of samples up front. This way you don't have to wait for each one. And then you'll be good to go, okay? Or alternatively, put it in the plate loader, and then you don't have to worry about it because it's all in the system and there's no worry about aerosolization or aerosols escaping.
Okay.
And we do this not to be like mean, it's just to keep everyone safe, that's all.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And with the help of the IBC and everything. All right, so you can go ahead and initialize now. And I now have the room to myself, so you get to see how crazy my face looks.
So I put my tube in.
And then you're going to hit run.
I'm scared. Okay.
Don't be scared. It's okay. I'm your
Just don't
cheerleader.
want
I'm your
everything
cheerleader
sucked up.
today.
Yeah.
So how much volume do you have?
I have like 250 microliter.
You're okay. Because we're going at 10 microliters per
Oh
minute.
yeah.
And you have an amazing amount of sample. This is looking great.
Yeah, this is concentrated. This sample is concentrated, yeah.
I love it. So this is where I'm going to show you something that I think you're going to fall in love with. This little G hand that I'm hovering over, if you click on that, what I now want you to do, I'm going to keep an eye, forward scatter and side scatters 32 and 39. So I just want us to remember those numbers. What I want you to do in the forward scatter, side scatter dot plot, click and drag on the population and drag them to where you think they should be. I know it's a weird concept, but just click and drag it and bring it up.
Maybe? I don't know.
And yeah, so that gate is how they automatically set it based on where they think the bead should be or where they think things should be. We can always adjust that gate later on. So I would bring it a little bit higher and
Oh,
scatter.
okay. I think I understand what is going on.
Yep,
Instead of adjusting the values manually in this table,
yep.
moving it here does it. Oh, that's so cool. I had
Isn't
to
that
do it
awesome?
manually, like, 100 volts,
Yep.
120 volts previously. This is so cool.
It's such an awesome, awesome tool. It's one of my favorite things about the software. So I would probably increase the forward scatter a little bit, Shruthi. And I should have asked this earlier on. Am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Yeah, actually,
Okay.
you were one of the few people who got it right on first try.
Okay.
So I was
Okay.
very happy.
All right, good. I try and ask that early on because I hate mispronouncing people's names. Okay. So
But
now
this pentagonic gate is small right now. Can you increase it?
we'll increase it. For now, I just want to, I'm not even going to worry about gating at this point. I just want to make
Oh,
sure
right.
our
This is
gains are
for
okay.
compens. Okay.
Exactly. And we're still going to adjust the gating later on. But what I would do is I'm just going to adjust it a little bit because I would probably just try and use the scaling that we've got. And sometimes you can get a little bit of a better resolution there.
Oh, so right now we are not trying to move the population into the pentagon. That's not our.
No,
Oh, okay.
that's just
That's
the
what I was trying.
default setup. Yeah, I should have been clear on that. I'm sorry. So that polygon gate is automatically put there by the software. But what we could do is we could just say, okay, we'll adjust it.
Oh,
We'll
that's what
bring
I
it up.
wanted to know. Yeah, like
Yeah.
how to make it bigger. Okay.
Yeah. So you just kind of click wherever, and I'll let you do that later on. The other thing I want to be mindful of is we could look at more events. So as opposed to 1,000, let's look at 10,000. So add another 0 and hit enter. Much easier to see, right? The other thing, we're going to be very careful about this because you're doing an apoptosis assay. But are you familiar with threshold as well? And how to set the thresholds on the, okay. So what winds up happening on the cytometer, Shruthi, is that you have a minimum signal that has to be met by some parameter in order for the cytometer to even recognize it. So what you can do is you can increase or decrease the threshold. So if I go to this tab, it's right now it's on automatic on forward scatter. If you were to say, I want to do it manually and I know where my cells are, I can click this little threshold button and then I can come up and I can adjust it and click there. And then all of a sudden, this is all I see, right? So anything below that is now not being recognized. You want to be extra cautious in your assays because you're doing apoptosis.
And
So
I want to see the dead cells and debris, especially. Yeah.
exactly. So because of that, we're just going to be mindful and make sure that we are, careful about where we set it, okay? So we're not going to set it too low, right? So I think this is actually perfect. We're going to leave as is, and we're going to hit stop because now what I want us to do is I want us to check our single colors of our FITC and PI and make sure that everything is on scale before we record everything. Now, I have you do that in the unstained because if you were to kind of go down and look at the blue 525 or the yellow green and go down in the sample, it's going to make changes to those tubes for the gain and not ones above it. So I want you to check every single, that might seem confusing. I want you to check every single sample gain and make sure that everything's on scale, all working from this one unstained sample. Because if not, if I were to go here, so say I were to go to this one, I would load it and I change one of those gains, it's only going to change for this sample.
Okay.
And that is a huge pain in the butt. Okay. Because then you have to try and remember which ones were, kind of changed and make sure that you track those edits. And You do not deserve that headache in your life. So now let's go ahead and let's load the Fitzy first.
Hopefully this works.
Like I said, fingers crossed. You're doing great so far.
So, run. Can I change it to 1000? Oh no. Tube contains data. Overwrite it?
Yep, we're going to overwrite it.
I'm just going to change it to 1000 because this one is not as concentrated. Oh no, that shouldn't matter though. Never mind.
Okay, so we can see it's coming through. Now, let's go ahead and let's adjust.
Gain.
So right now, let's adjust the gate. Not the gate, because are these a different cell type by any chance?
They're dead cells. Like, so these are like,
Oh, okay.
I had to kill them and stain them with
For
the
a nice
annexed
positive
Fitzy.
control.
Yeah.
All right, so let's change that events to display back to 10,000.
Yeah, sorry.
No, it's okay. Don't apologize at all. And now what you see is that the, you know, for our Nexen, right now it's only showing us what's in this gate. So as we expand this, if I bring this up, you can see, right? So you have signal. Now, what I meant about the beads being sticky, there they are. We're just going to exclude them by gating. That's all. So we're not going to stress out about it too much. And we
So those are the beads. Okay.
Exactly. And you can tell they have that really tight peak. So we always know when to keep them out. But look, your signal's on scale.
Yeah.
So that's great. So we're going to hit stop.
Wait, what do you mean by signals on scale? What does that mean?
That means, so if this signal, like this positive right here, if it was beyond that 10 to the 7th, that means it's kind of like if I were to go like this, right? It's like taking a picture of someone with their head cut off. You don't know.
Yeah.
Like, I could have 2 heads. You don't know what color hair I have. You don't know any type of hat on. You could have like a dim and high expressing. You could have all these details that you're missing out on. And also remember that the MFIs are only linear to a certain range. So if you're beyond the scaling of the detector, you can't rely on your stats.
So then what do I do if it's beyond the scale? Like,
if it's
do I
beyond,
manually adjust here?
Yep, you use that G button and you adjust the gain and bring it down.
Wait, so I use the G button and then adjust where?
Adjust it on that plot, and that will adjust the gains for that detector. Exactly.
Something like that, just as an example.
Exactly.
But then if I did this, now I would have to go back to the unstained and move it to that same number.
Nope, you're already on that unstained sample. So now what's happening is that number was applied to all of them. And so if you look now, you see how it's at 1, then at 2. If we hit this little, I'm going to try hitting this little back button.
Yeah, that's undo.
I'm going to hit it, undo it again.
Because I thought if you would want the unstained fluorescence to be like closer to 0, so that's why I was trying to move things to the left.
Nope, you don't have to worry about that. Look, we have all of this range. Let's utilize it. So if let's bring this back up to where it was, so that people, as long as it's on scale, that's what we're concerned about. Now, for the purposes of today, we're good. But for the future, like I'm going to show you a method, or I'll link you to a video that shows you a method that you can calculate what's the best signal, or what's the best gain rather, to get the best separation. We're not going to do it today for sake of time, but I'm going to reference you to a video that will help you out with it, okay? So we're going to hit stop, and that video is based on samples that we're running in Diva. So you'd have to make gain changes as opposed to voltage set changes, but everything theoretically also still applies. Because imagine, Shruthi, so when you tried bringing that close to 0, it brought the gain down to 1. That's the lowest possible amplification there. And you might run into scenarios where, you know, you're still not down at 0 and you're not getting a good separation of your positive and negative. So you want to be mindful. We don't want to set gains or voltages based on the unstained, really. What we want to do is we want to keep in mind doing a gain walk up, so we can make adjustments to gain like a couple hundred at a time, and calculate the stain index to see where am I getting the best separation out of these different gains, making sure that we're we're at a point typically where as you do gain walkups, what'll happen is you'll have, when I say separation index, it's the difference between the positive and the negative and the best separation there. And it takes into account the MFI of the positive, the MFI of the negative, and also the spread of the negative as well. And typically what you see is as we go up and gain from like a value of 1 up higher, it'll increase, 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 and then it should plateau. Because increasing the gains past a certain point doesn't really do much of anything. Okay. So let's throw on your PI now and your single color. We're just going to make sure that's on scale. I'm also going to check iLab to see to make sure, or to see if the instrument
is reserved.
Yeah, so I think we have it till 4:30, even though my Outlook said a little bit longer. I just want to make sure that we're good for till 5. Because how many experimental samples do you have, Shruthi?
1, 2, just 3.
Okay. We have plenty of time, but I'm just going to make sure that no one's on after you, that's all. So go ahead and check that PI for me, and I'm going to check an iLab very quickly. All right, that PI looks gorgeous. And you can also see, I'm going to show you one more thing, right? So if you have this gated just on your, where your typical scatter be for live cells, you don't see a signal, right? If you adjust that to just where these are, the dead cells are, you see that yellow-green shift up. And when you have it around both, you see the nice representation.
That separation. Oh, that's so beautiful. Yeah.
Right? It's gorgeous. Okay. So you can go ahead and hit stop. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're just going to record each single color and calculate our compensation. Is everything making sense so far?
I don't know what you meant by the last thing you said.
About the stain index and everything?
No, that part was okay. Like just now what you said, we are gonna
oh, now we're gonna
record. So we are gonna change from unstained to blue. Is that what you meant?
So yeah, now what we're gonna do is we're gonna load our unstained sample back on and actually record it. Because for all
okay.
we've been checking voltages to make sure everything's okay, but we haven't actually recorded any data. We've just been doing like a QC check on all of our settings. And now what we need to do is we need to go ahead and put the correct sample on for whatever tube was highlighted in the sample, you know, in the sample tube list. And then we go ahead and actually record it. And we're going to record each one, unstained, the FITC, and the PI. And then we'll be able to calculate the comp once those are all recorded.
Okay, makes sense.
Okay. All right, so now we're good. Go ahead and hit, well, I think we have enough events. You can leave it as record. Without having to adjust the number of events. I think 10,000 should be okay here. And is this the unstained tube without anything in it?
Yep.
Okay.
Oh no. It does say unstained, but it has both live and dead.
It's okay that it has live and dead as long as the PI isn't in there.
I didn't add the PI.
No, but yeah, so as long as the PI is not in there, you're okay. So that's fine.
But here, why do I see 2 peaks here?
You can have a difference in autofluorescence, or the other thing that might have happened potentially, we'll have to see when you run your PI control. You might have you might have had a little bit of PI stick to the lines when you're in the single color. So we might need to, you know, just do a couple of back flushes. But let's run the FITC and then let's run the PI again and see it, because it might just be a difference in autofluorescence.
Okay. So now it's the FITC. So I'm gonna go to this guy.
Exactly. And then you see at this one, there's the blue 525 positive gate. And once you're finished recording that, you'll hit run and record. You'll adjust that gate to be around the FITC positive.
This, I'm gonna use the whole thing, right? So I need to expand this up.
Yeah, so you're gonna use the whole thing. So expand that exactly. And then go ahead and hit record.
But what about this gate?
Oh, we can adjust that after. It's okay. So I always try and think about it like, all right, let me just record, make sure I have the events there, and then I can adjust the gate after, because I don't want to risk running out of sample, and I can always adjust the gate after. That's the only reason I do that. Or you could always also do it during as well. There's nothing wrong with that either.
That's pretty fast.
Yeah, you have nice concentrated samples. It looks great.
Yay. All right, so last single color control.
Okay, so let's go ahead and hit record. And if we do see that there was a little bit of carryover, that PI in the lines, we can go back and we can just do a couple of back flushes and then rerun the unstained. Because I'm just going to take control of the screen for a second.
Sure.
If that's okay.
Yeah.
Right? Because your positive's right about here, right?
So
it's at that first tick after 10 to the third. And it's nice because it shows you the color there, where that is. If we go back here to unstained, yeah, it's that first tick after 10 to the third. It's there. So let's go ahead. What we can do in this case, you see this back flush icon? We can do that a couple of times. So we'll do a couple of back flushes, and then we'll also do a prime, and then we can rerun the unstained.
Okay.
So sometimes the dyes can get to be a little sticky in the lines, especially those, especially the viability ones. But we'll just account for that. It's not a big deal. I probably should have had you done that anyway. So we'll just do back flush one more time, and then what I'm going to have you do, go to cytometer and standby and do a prime. And then after that prime is done, we'll put it, we'll initialize it. Beautiful. Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's going to take about a minute or so. And after that, we'll put the sample back on.
Why is this machine called Wallace?
Oh, there's Rui named it based on like some pioneers in flow cytometry.
Oh wow.
So yeah, he was doing it for that reason. So I'm ashamed because I don't know exactly about the Wallace name. But that's also why there's Wade for the Aurora, and we have some different names going on there.
Cool.
It's all based on like history. I think he might have put it originally in the description. My brain has capacity for some amount of things, but then once it goes beyond a certain level, my brain just turns to mush. So that's one of the things I think I forgot.
That's okay. You
Yeah.
already taught me so much today.
Okay, good.
It's so interesting.
Good. Yeah, as that's priming, actually, let me show you the other educational content that we have, because I think you'll really be into it. In addition to some of this stuff, right? So you're looking at, you're going to be doing some analysis. Are you going to be doing analysis in FlowJo or FCS Express?
I have no idea. I'll have to ask my lab, but I've used FlowJo before.
Okay, so regardless of which one you have, in services and software, we have information on how to go ahead and get either of those. Just so that you know, FlowJo you have to pay for, the lab has to pay for, it's $200 for the year. FCS Express is free through the Institute. So we offer both, but one of them is provided for free.
But do you have to have an MSK computer for that?
So for either one of them, you do not. What winds up happening is for FlowJo, the way it works now, it's not through a hardware address like it typically used to be, where you'd have like a license and like a serial number to work with a hardware address for your actual workstation, unless it's a shared computer. There are two different licensing options. One is a shared computer where multiple people can access one instrument. If you want an individual license, you can use a portal ID, which is like a login that you use online to log in with your credentials, and you can use FlowJo on up to 4 devices for one person.
Oh, okay.
Now, FCS Express, you use your login information on any computer that you want as well. So there's no limits there.
Okay.
So if you go to services and software, it goes through all that stuff. And then education and software, if you go to analysis software, when we had to shut down because of COVID, what we wound up having to do is go through, or not what we ended up having to do. What we did is we held virtual classrooms. So we had virtual classrooms on FlowJo and FCS Express, and there were about 12 total, where we had people join in. I think we had like around 100 people or so for most of the sessions, where they would come in and we'd do a live analysis with them on different topics. So compensation, cell cycle, instrument characterization, high parameter stuff, all of that. And these are all on our YouTube channel. And our YouTube channel is going to be youtube.com/she/flow mskcc, I believe. I hope. Yeah. So we also have some nerdy videos, right? So we have a cover of Piano Man, but we made it about cytometry.
Wow.
And like stuff like that. So
Wait, I think I saw this trending like a couple of months ago. I saw this on Twitter. Somebody had posted this on Twitter. I saw
yeah,
this.
so we posted on Twitter. The one that we had that was my favorite, the starter one, was I'll Sort Again.
Yeah, I think this is the one I saw.
Yeah. So that's the one, but we have plenty of stuff on here, so you could always visit.
Awesome. I'll check it out.
All right, so let's go ahead. We can go ahead and put the unstained on now. All you have to do is initialize it and pop it back on.
So go to cytometer. Oh no, initialize. Unstained. Yes. Yeah, this looks better, I think.
Yep, looks a lot better. So you can go ahead and record, and we're going to overwrite that. The other nice thing that I really, really like, Shruthi, is that I'm sure you've run into this scenario. I know I've run into this scenario. Every once in a while, you forget to hit record, and it's kind of a heartbreaker. Here on this instrument, if you forget to hit record and you just hit run, and you run till the sample volume's low, and you're like, oh, crud, and you stop the sample, it actually keeps those events and it still records anything that was done in run.
Oh, nice.
The only thing is if you forget to hit record, it's going to keep going and going and going, even if it sucks up air. So, you know, you're going to have, it'll go potentially forever. Not forever, but you know what I mean? So it's just going to go for a long time. But it's really nice because if you forget to hit record, you'll still have the events. So, okay. Now what we're ready to do is we're ready to go ahead and calculate our compensation. So what we're going to do is we're going to go up to settings at the top, and we're going to do compensation calculation. So it calculates the comp. And again, this is where, even though you only selected the 3 or the 2 fluorescent detectors, it's showing you the compensation for everything. Okay. Don't worry about this. It's fine. It's just something that's built into the software that we're going to kind of just, you know, ignore, but also use. All right. So then you hit save as. And I do this because I've noticed if I don't do it, sometimes it might be a little bit buggy and not carry over gains. I resave the comp here. So I typically go ahead and say like compensation final with a date or something like that. And I make sure I save this copy. Perfect. Okay. All right, and hit save. And now you can close out. Okay.
Close experiment?
Exactly. If you want to save it, hit yes. And now we have to open up our experiment. And we're going to import the comp into that experiment, but we just have to create our experiment first. So I used the wrong term there, I'm sorry. So new experiment. If it was open experiment, it would be to open one that's already existing. Okay, and you'll go there, exactly, to your folder, and you can name your experiment. Sure. I need more coffee. I apologize.
Me too, actually.
I know. We should get coffee after. So then you can open up that folder if you want to put it in there. There you go. Awesome.
I'm just gonna
Yeah.
hit save.
Okay. It might not. Okay. I wasn't sure if it would let you do it with dashes, but it did. So great. That's awesome. All right. So now what we're going to do is we have to reselect the detectors that we're using. So it's kind of a reinforcement to know like which what detectors and everything. So you're going to go back up to settings and you're going to hit set channel. And now, unfortunately here, you do not have the option to hit select all. So I'm sorry, it's annoying.
So manually, I have to unselect the ones I don't
Yes.
need.
And I am so sorry for that. I wish that
No,
I was a
that's
software
okay.
developer so I can change it, but I can't. Okay, so you're going to scroll down. Okay, and then you could also set the labels that you want, like an XN and NPI. What you'll also see is you see that there's the checkoff for area and height. Unfortunately, what you're used to in other software is just to look at log area and then any like your forward scatter, side scatter, you do height area with. If you uncheck height here, you can't look at the forward scatter, side scatter, and height, so we always leave it. So then we get log and height and area. It's just another parameter, not a big deal. Okay. So then we're gonna, if there's no other tubes for it to apply to, we only have tube 1, so you could just go ahead and hit close. So we don't have to hit the apply to button.
But I have many tubes, right?
We're going to create them after, and then it'll apply to all those tubes after.
Okay.
So because it's just in that one, it's kind of like grandfathered in, where when we add the rest of them, they're all there. Okay, now what we have to do is we have to import our comp matrix and gain. So I'm going to have you open up the acquisition settings. So when you click on acquisition settings, I want us to keep, like when you see the forward scatter, side scatter, those are our original settings, like that we modified. So when we go up to settings, again, up at the top, you're going to go compensation matrix, and we're going to import. Not import from library, but import. Yeah, okay. And then you're going to go to your folder, exactly, and we're going to choose the final one. Open. Now here, you're going to have this option, 3 options. Import the comp matrix and convert it based on whatever the gains are now. Never want to do it, okay? I'm sure you've always been taught, I'm sure, that you need to run your comp samples and your experimental samples at the same settings. They're trying to say you don't have to necessarily. We don't agree with that. It assumes perfect linearity of the instrument. No instrument's perfectly linear. I've tested it before on previous CytoFLEXes. They're great instruments, but that's not the case. That also be like, you can just do the comp matrix only, but then your gains haven't been adjusted. So we always want to use that last option, comp matrix and gain. You hit OK. You can see very minimal comp, but it's there, and you did it correctly. Okay. Now it's already applied to that tube, and you can see that because if I kind of hover over here, you see how the comp has been applied. So it's there. And then you can hit close in the compensation matrix. And your forward scatter and side scatter has been adjusted. Yep. So we're good. Be mindful that one person recently told me of a bug where that did not carry over. So just keep an eye on it, right? And just kind of, you're really good. You have good attention to detail. So just for your sake of like quality control, just make sure you just keep an eye on it, right? So we can X out of that now because we don't need to stress about it anymore. And now what we can do is we can go ahead and start setting up some plots and load your samples and start running your samples. I know that we ran your unstained and your comp control experiment, but we're still like, I think it's going to be a good idea for us to rerun it and re-record it. So I'm going to show you how we set up some plots and gates, and then I'll let you do everything, okay? So here, if I hover over this, that's a histogram. Here, dot plot, but if I look at that little arrow to the side, it lets me choose between dot, density, pseudo color, and contour. Also have the option for multiple histograms. So if I say I want a Nexen NPI as a histogram, I click on both of those, it'll create 2. Okay. Same thing for multiple. Why isn't it letting me? Sorry. So the same thing for multiple dot plots. You have the option to create multiple all at once. It's not my favorite because, you know, you'd have to say, all right, I want side scatter versus this and this. But if I wanted an Xn, like if I wanted a variety of them, I find it easier just to do it one at a time as opposed to like this. But it's whatever you prefer. It's not my run, it's yours. So I fully back whatever way you want to do it. Okay, then you have statistics that you can
And
click
if
on.
I set up these plot schematics and save this experiment next time, can I save some time from creating plots?
We'll save this as a template. This way you don't have to, like, you know, and have that time investment next time. Right? You also have the option to do a population hierarchy. So if you click on it, it automatically pops up. And these are all your gating tools, right? So you have a lasso. I typically tend to use polygon or rectangle or a quadrant gating. Those are the ones that I typically tend to use. What I ask you not to ever use, because it's super, super dangerous, is the adjust compensation hand. So you know how we did the gain before and we were able to, it lets us do that with comp values. And that is one of the most dangerous things. Thank you. Oh my God. I want to hug you. If I could come in there and hug you right now, I would. Because it's, you know, there's such a problem with rigor and reproducibility, right? Now, if people could just drag their populations wherever they want.
You can make it look like whatever you want, right? It's crazy.
Yes, thank you.
I know. With flow, I know it's dangerous.
Yeah. It's like music to my ears here doing this training with you because you understand all the implications. So that's awesome.
Noise.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So now what we can do, I'm going to have you go ahead. Let's start making up a dot plot. We'll do one for forward scatter, side scatter. And then we'll just throw on your, and you can do a scatter gate and we'll record a minimum number of events. And then you can set up your whole gating strategy. Okay. And if you left click on any of those parameters, if like say if you wanted height, you'd go down there. Yeah.
So which ones are the typical ones to do?
For singlets, I typically tend to start off looking at forward scatter height versus area.
So that's forward scatter area, FSCA.
Yeah, and when I typically tend to do it, my axes are swapped, so I'll do height.
I'll do exactly what you did.
Yeah. Golden. Okay.
Oh, can you give me a second? My glove tore, so I'm just gonna replace it.
Yes, of course.
I found an extra large, so this should be fine.
Oh, right behind you. There should be more behind you if it's not your size. So right behind you.
Oh yeah, they're right here. Anyway, it's fine. I like this color.
You're stylish. You have two different colors. I like it.
Cool. So FSCA, FSCH. Then the third one will be same with side scatter. Is that what you do?
Yeah, typically. And sometimes I'll play around with it, Shruthi. So I'll say, all right, like, you know, sometimes it might look better forward scatter width versus area. You don't have the option for more than one detector here in width. So it automatically goes to forward scatter for width.
So if I just want to look at annexin as a dot plot, what would you plot it against?
Whenever I'm looking at a killing asset or like whenever I'm looking at cell death, I usually look at FTSE versus PI. But if
PI.
No,
yeah, I also want to do that. I mean,
okay,
yeah, that's so how like I want my final data to look at.
Yeah, and then if anything, if you want to look at singles, you could just do it versus scatter. It's okay. But the way you have it set up now is perfect.
Okay, so this is done.
Yep. So let's go ahead and let's run put that unstained sample on. You can initialize it. And then once it's on, you can set up a gate and we'll set the events to record to be on that gated scatter population. And then we can worry about setting the remainder of the gating after.
Okay. So run.
Mm-hmm. And you can change the events to display to be a little bit higher, maybe 10,000. And then you'll might as well select that polygon gate and gate each click as a node. Nice because it actually shows you if you double click where it would, how it would look when you closed it. Perfect. So let's do this. Let's go ahead and set the events to record as opposed to 10,000 all events. Maybe let's do 20,000 in P1. Okay, and you're going to record
Is
that.
this gate okay, or should I include these these cells in the bottom too?
Let's wait and see. I think let's exclude those for now. And then go ahead and record. You might have some apoptotic cells there, but for the most part, that's probably some debris.
Yeah.
But if you're not sure, it's best to, let's just make sure that from what we know is our live and dead cells, you have a minimum number of events there. Okay. Now, the other thing, Shruthi, that I'm going to mention to you, as opposed to looking at all events for the forward scatter height area, you likely want to look at your gated population by scatter, right? So all you have to do, left click, key 1.
Nice.
And then you have a really nice pull out of your aggregates. You can also go ahead if you want to and zoom in, click this little zoom in button and say, all right, I want to zoom in right there.
Nice.
And get a little bit of a better resolution there. But I'll let you go ahead and create your gating strategy now. And once you get to the Annexin PI, I'm going to show you another cool tool.
So actually for the gating, can you help me? I don't even know what I'm doing. I used to do this as a grad student, but I'm not sure if, so it's this population which I would want, right?
Yeah, exactly. So why don't you can go ahead and do it, and then I will correct if anything, but you're doing really great. Awesome. The only thing I would say here is, because we're looking at height versus area, we want to be more restrictive on area. So I'll be a little bit more lenient on the height and go around that bulk. This way it doesn't I
Leave
just
out any cells, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But nothing crazy. That was really good. And then we'll do
Same thing here.
Yep, the same for side scatter height area.
So we'll pick this population, right? No.
Yep. What I'd likely do first, though, is change it from all events to looking at P2.
P2, yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, and I do it just like that, just like you're doing, because if you just do one click and one node, it's a straight line. That's how you want it. Sometimes people will try and create multiple nodes, and then if they want to adjust it, it's really annoying. So how you did it is great. Awesome. I would not make any changes to that. Now here I'm going to show you something that might be very bizarre to you. When you've done analysis in FlowJo, what you might have done is adjust the width basis, because that negative scale, the scaling on the low end, you might need to adjust. We can do that here in this software. It doesn't carry over to FlowJo, but it's going to help you pull out the data.
Hey, so my screen, oh, okay, it's back. My screen disappeared for a second, but it's back.
Okay. So in FlowJo, right, when we look at that negative space, you can adjust the scaling on the low end. And we can do that here. So it's called log linear coefficient. And if I just click and drag.
Oh, yeah, that's what I wanted to do. Yeah.
Exactly. It's just adjusting that low end scaling. So I'm going to do it how I would like to see it personally. And then I'm going to put it back so that you can do however you'd like. All right. Because you might look at that and say, oh, that looks weird, but it's just that scaling. So you can go ahead.
It's all relative, yeah. So.
Yeah, but it's not going to adjust your data. Like your data is not changing. It's just the scaling of it.
It's just that when I open my other samples, they will all be measured relative to this. So if there's a positive, it would come here. Whereas if I had not adjusted this, this would be here, then my positive would be here, right?
Yeah. Yep. So it's not going to adjust. It's not going to change what's positive and what's negative or anything as far as the MFIs go. It's just going to adjust that visualization of the negative and that low end of the scaling. That's all.
Does that look okay for the unstained?
Yeah, I really wouldn't split hairs over this because you're going to make the adjustments in FlowJo as well. But if I was in FlowJo, I'd probably do something like maybe that. That's a personal preference, right? Because I like seeing that full distribution. I don't like anything up against the axis. And that's what I would like to see if I was reviewing a paper that had flow data in it. Right.
But already we have recorded and everything has been recorded. So when I open up FlowJo, I can do the same thing and make this image, right?
Yeah. Okay. And then what you can do, if you want to do like a quadrant gate or a hinge quadrant, you can set that so that the lower left encapsulates everything. And we can get an idea as you're running each one, populate like the percentages of annexin and FITC as an initial analysis before you do your deep analysis in FlowJo or FCS Express?
Sure. I don't know how to do that though.
That's okay. You just click wherever, like, typically I'd set the cursor, up and a little bit more to the right. Yeah, and up a little bit more, because this is your unstained, right?
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
No, don't be
Now
sorry.
makes sense.
You're
This makes sense.
doing phenomenal. There's really no need.
So should I include these also as part of my?
No, I think you can go right about there. And then remember, this is just like an initial like rough analysis, so I wouldn't even stress about it. And you can see it's 99.5%. And what you probably will want to do is set up a population hierarchy so you could start seeing some of those percentages. So that's a little bit to the left, right there. Exactly. Okay. Last thing I'm going to have you do, why don't we rename it so that instead of it saying tube 1 in the sample list, you can edit the name and you can have it say unstained. Awesome. All right. And then what we can do is we can go to next tube and we're just going to run and record all your samples. And I think the 20,000 in P1 might be enough for you. If it's not, if you want more, if you want less, it's up to you based on what you're looking to do.
I think that looks reasonable.
Okay. If you did have a lot of aggregates, you might want to adjust it so it's based on P3 so that you make sure you're analyzing a minimum number of single cells. But if your cells are nice and in a single cell suspension, you should be fine.
And also, because this is an apoptotic assay, I don't want to be too stringent on the gates. Like, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right. I don't want to ignore the debris or dead cells like you typically do in a flow assay.
Exactly right. You don't want to do any of that. You still want to look at single cells, right? Because you could have a live cell and a dead cell stuck together. So you don't want to do any of that, but you are absolutely correct with your gating concepts.
Okay, so we're going to go to the next sample. Let's see what that looks like. So, going to run.
Is everything making sense still?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. All right, so go ahead and hit record. Is this also like an unstained or?
This is not an unstained. This is stained, but it's a control. So there should not be too many dead cells.
Okay.
Is the hope.
So there's some with PI, you have about 34%, it looks like, and it's pulling up above that gate in the quadrant. So that looks pretty good.
So this means that 65% are alive and 35% are dead, right?
Yeah, from what you have gated in the scatter and singlet, yep.
Oh, okay. But is this P1 gate looking reasonable to you? Or because earlier if I did a flow assay, I would just gate on this guy, right?
Yeah, if you did that, if you were just looking for live cells and just looking for, maybe CD marker identification or something like that, or for some protein, whatever it is, then yes, you would want to be a little bit more stringent there. But a lot of times, Shruthi, what I do actually is when I'm setting up a gating strategy, sometimes I don't even start off with scatter. If I were to do an immunophenotyping, I might start off with DAPI versus CD45 and pull out those live cells first because it pulls out better. And remember, so if I look and I kind of adjust the scaling here, so it defaults to 0 to 5 million. If I say, all right, I think my scatter's a little bit higher. So if I set that to 6 million, you can see, oh, maybe I'm cutting a little bit out. So maybe I have to adjust this a bit. And that's okay. And then you're encapsulating most all, and you can use that to your advantage.
Yep. So I'm going to go to the next tube.
Yep, next tube, rename it. And see, you were nervous, but everything's working out beautifully.
Yeah, I think my staining worked, so that's all.
Oh, it absolutely did.
So, because I know that my next sample should have more dead cells because I could see it under the scope. So
yeah.
Yay, I'm so happy. My first flow experiment at MSK.
I'm happy too, and you've been doing wonderful.
Thank you.
All right, awesome. So why don't you go ahead and hit record here. This is definitely, you could definitely see a change in that scatter too, right?
Yeah.
So remember, if you didn't adjust this and bring it over, worst case, all that happens is that you record more than what you want. Because if you're too restrictive, you're just going to get more events. So I'd
Got
rather
it.
you be, you know, if you need a minimum number of events, I'd rather you be more restrictive than less restrictive. But look, you're seeing the annexin pop up.
Yay,
Yep.
that's awesome. So these are my dead cells, right?
Your dead cells are going to be the ones, so you have Q1 upper left and Q1 upper right. Those are going to be like, so you have early apoptosis, you have, you know, apoptotic and necrotic. So you want, like, you know, you kind of take into account all of that. But this looks great.
Yay.
And the other thing too, the reason I like this as well, sometimes I prefer the pseudo color. So if I click on that pseudo color plot, this is just sometimes I prefer it, right? If I look at P3, you can adjust this a bit, right? You can look at that annexin and PI, and you also get that view as well. And it might help you pull out the populations even better, right? But it's your preference. Little things also in the software. If you want this gate to then apply to every other tube, you right click on the gate and apply it to all tubes or apply to individual tubes. So as you make changes, it only applies to that one sample. It's kind of like a sample specific gating, but if you ever want that change to be made to everything, you just right click and apply to all.
This is my last sample.
Okay. And then I think I asked you this already, so I apologize. It's kind of like I have a brain of a goldfish sometimes because I have so many emails that come through. Did you take the Principles of Flow Cytometry class already?
No, but I want to sign up for the September one. So I've emailed the person who's giving the information about the classes. And so I'm going to sign up for the September one.
Perfect. Yes. So go ahead and record, Shruthi, and then,
Oh yeah, sorry.
no, don't be sorry. I interrupted you with a question. So all that you have to do for that, because I'm sure that you probably,
So I have a question. So this gate right now excludes these cells here, right? What are these?
So it could either be some debris, right? So if, that's why sometimes I like looking at this pseudo color. What it can be, you might see that that's debris. So if I look at annexin versus PI here, what those likely are, like this right here, is likely debris. But then you have the other ones that are pulling up by DAPI, but you see where, you see how when I created that gate, it's below.
Oh yeah, it's over there. Yeah.
It's that green color, right? And you can see where those are. So what you might want to do is use that as to your advantage and adjust that scatter gating and be a little bit more inclusive, right? And so, you know, it's right about here, and you're, you know, make sure that you're including some cells that are adjusting by scatter. But if I start moving this down too much, it's going to include some debris, okay?
Got it.
The other thing you could potentially include in the future, just, yeah,
Sorry.
and it's okay. So here too also, we probably adjust that. This is all, again, going to be downstream and analysis software. And look how beautiful these populations are pulling out.
Yeah. Yay!
It looks really, really good.
Yes.
But another thing that you might want to consider potentially, if you have a lot of debris sometimes in your sample and you notice it, using a vital marker like calcine. Calcine goes in, and when your cells are metabolically active, there are esterases in there that can cleave the calcine and cause it to create fluorescence, right? Debris will not be able to do that because it's not metabolically active. So what winds up happening sometimes is you might run into scenarios where you have dead cells, right? But you also have a lot of debris with your live cells. So your dead cells will pick up the PI, but what won't pick up the PI is the debris, right? You might have fragments of cells that have died off that will pick up the annexin, and you know, typically annexin and PI is just fine, and you're okay. It's just you might want to consider it, you know, just to validate the use of calcine at some point. And there's calcine violet that you can use. There's calcine green, which would be the same as FITSI, but if you use calcine violet, that's another thing to be able to pull out live cells from dead cells as well.
Okay. I'll keep that in mind.
Yeah. Other things just to help you out in the future, if you double click on any of these, you can change the color. So if you don't like a certain color, you can change it. You can also edit the name by double clicking on it and doing all that stuff. I don't stress out over that because honestly, you're going to be redoing all of the analysis in FlowJo.
In a software, yeah.
So it's up to you. So now we're essentially good to go ahead and save all the data and save a template of the experiment as well. Okay. Unless, is there anything else you want to go over in the software or?
No, this was awesome. I think I'll still have to play around again. I hope I remember some of this, but it's fairly intuitive, so I think I should be okay.
It is.
And I have that nice SOP PDF, which is super informative too.
Yeah, that one's really good for startup and shutdown. And Joanna in the facility did go ahead and put together the experimental one and a compensation one. I've just been super busy, so I haven't had a chance to review it yet, but it's on my list. So hopefully sooner rather than later, I'll get that done. But yeah, we have all those resources, and I'm going to get this uploaded to YouTube hopefully today so I can send it out to you. So
that's perfect. That's perfect. That would be super helpful.
Yeah. So essentially it just has to save to my computer, and then I have to get it up on YouTube. And I give you a link that's probably not yet ready, but in like an hour or two, it's ready.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
No
so
problem.
We can save the experiment.
So all you have to do is go up to File at the very top, and you're going to hit Save, and that saves the experiment. And then we're also going to hit Save As. Or sorry, not I didn't mean to do that. Sorry. Yeah, we're also going to hit Save as Template. Exactly. And you can put it in your folder. So Site Expert Data. There you go. Perfect. And you could just, leave that, make that template name. And I'll show you after how to work from this template as well. Perfect. Hit Save. And then the last thing that we're going to save is the FCS file. So you're going to go to File and Export FCS file. Okay, you're going to select all at the bottom left. So the nice thing is you have the select all option here. So that's really good. And you're going to go to Next. Okay, and then under Path, I want you to go to Site Expert Data and also put this under your folder. This way we can easily move everything over from one location. So it's
was it in Documents? Okay.
Exactly. You have a good memory. Okay, click there. And then I create a new folder in there, and I call it FCS files. This is what you're going to want to use when you do the analysis.
Maybe I can put that into this. Yeah, I wanted it within my.
Perfectly fine. The only thing that's
my screen disappeared. Hold on. Okay, it's back.
Yeah. Okay. Before you hit OK, just make sure. Yeah, exactly. And then hit OK now. Okay, and go to Next. Awesome. Okay.
Yay!
Close out. Very, very exciting stuff. And then what we're going to do now is we can close out of this. You can hit File and Close. Now, if you wanted to create, work from this template in the future, all you'd have to do is do New Experiment from Template. Okay. You would hit Browse and create it wherever you want, and then you'd hit Browse and select where the template is and highlight that one.
So browse the template or browse the experiment?
So you browse both, right? So browse for the new experiment to say this is where I want my experiment to go, the new one that I'm creating, and then browse from the template, and then you go and select that .xitm file. Exactly. So what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you copy your template to your server so that you have it as a backup or to ShareBox or whatever. But then I'm also going to have you leave a copy of that template on the instrument itself. This way you have it. Okay.
Also, these FCS files, can I share, copy it to some folder, or do I need to bring a flash drive? How does it work?
So that is we can either connect and map to your network drive, like your server, or you have a flash drive, or the third option is ShareBox. So that's the file transfer service here at MSK. Any one of those will work for you.
Okay. I can try the shared folder if possible.
Yeah, we'll work through that together. Let's start the cleaning though, since it takes about 7 or 8 minutes, and I want to make sure that we have the time for that, and then we could do it at the same time.
Okay.
So at the end of each experiment, I'm going to go back to the Chrome for a second to show you in that SOP. What we have to do at the very end, if you were to run a plate at any point or need to run the plate, I want you to let me know so I could walk you through how to run plates on here. But what's kind of annoying is that if you run plate, because there's 2 separate sample lines, you have to do 2 cleanings after, okay?
I'm
Not too,
never gonna run a plate. I
okay,
know
all
that
right.
already.
Okay.
Just having you said that, I'm like, I'm never gonna run a plate.
We're likely going to be adjusting that cleaning procedure though to speed it up. So if you do have a lot of samples to run, it's going to save you so much time to do the plate regardless. So don't rule it out. Just let me know if that's something you want to do, and we can work through it because it is a nice plate loader. But then we do want to make sure it's in the right mode, right? So all we have to do is go to cytometer and daily clean. And oops, sorry.
This
Again,
is only if you're the last person to use the machine or every time you use the machine?
everybody. So this is, everyone has to do the daily cleaning. So it's just cleaning after your appointment's done, because if it sits with this, like cells in the flow cell or anything like that, or, you know, it can actually cause some really bad clogs and issues as as everything dries up. So all we do is, it's 8 minutes. We run culture clean for 3 minutes, or culture cleanse. So what you'll see behind, right by the instrument is a blue bottle of culture cleanse. Yeah, and you're just going to take a transfer pipette from over in that area that I mentioned before, unless there's already a tube there that's made up already.
There's a tube, but no, it has water. It's not.
Okay, so you're just going to need to make one up for culture cleanse. That's all.
Okay, so how much do I add?
Okay, so you can add about 2 mils or so, more than enough, and you can eyeball it. You don't need to measure it with a micro pipette or anything.
Does that look okay?
That looks beautiful. Yep. Okay, so in the cytometer, then all we have to do is go to cytometer and daily clean, and we do the 3 and 5, and then we're essentially good to go. Transfer your data, and that's it. Okay, so it already says 3. The cleaning tube is on. You hit run, and then
Oh my
let's see.
God, this is so nice, because in the previous, like my previous lab, we had to like set a timer and change the tubes
Oh
every
no,
time.
yeah, no, you don't have to worry
This
about
is the
that.
good life. This is the good life. I feel so pampered today. It's awesome.
I like it. That's awesome. So, Shruti, what I'm going to do, I'm going to walk you through, if you know your server address, how to connect to it. And the nice thing is this will be recorded, so for you to reference that after. But if you have any issues, just reach out, okay? But if you open up this file explorer, in order to map a network drive, if you're not familiar, you right-click on this PC, select Map Network Drive.
Okay.
Now, the thing is, what we use here at MSK, or what we use on the CytoFLEX and the Aurora actually to log into these computers, you saw it was the ID number from your badge, right? And everything like that. And that's how we track usage and all of that stuff. It's called Pagina, and we have to be careful on how we log in. I'm going to show you why, but I just wanted to give you that reference that, you know, we're not logging in directly through like an MSK account. So we're not automatically connected to it. So we have to make sure we map your drive. Okay. So what you always do is you unselect or deselect, reconnect it, sign in, and you make sure you're connecting using different credentials. And here is where you would put in whatever your folder is. So for example,
It's white lab.
yeah, so you can probably just go ahead and swap out Rudin for white. That's typically what it tends to be.
Thank God, because I didn't remember what comes
It's
before
okay.
that.
I would have had you covered. I usually try this one. If that doesn't work though, typically I don't know, because some people have unique file path names. So let's go ahead and hit finish. And then when you hit finish, what's going to happen is it's going to say Pagina, right? And that's why I said that. What you need to do is go to more choices, and you're going to use a different account, and we're going to log in through your MSK account. So this is where you type in MSKCC/.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
okay. You
yeah,
can
yeah.
always go back. Yeah. And then, yeah, awesome. And then we'll see if this works. Okay.
I think it worked. Yeah. Yay.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. So you can go there. And then what I tend to do, after you create your folder, let me know when you're ready to transfer everything over, because I'll show you what I typically tend to do.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay. So what I would do is I would drag this over, make life easy for myself, come here and go to the Documents tab, Site Expert Data, right? And you have your information.
By the way, the 3-minute wash is done.
Okay, this will take 2 seconds. So
Yeah, no
I'll just
worries.
show you quick so that it's like, you know, we're following the path, and then we'll go back and do the water. So what I would do is I'd come over here, just drag it over, make sure it all copies over. That's it. Now you have all
Yay.
of your data. I go ahead and I double check everything to make sure it's in there. So not only do you have your experiment and your template, but you also have all of your FCS files. So these are
So
the
why did
FCS
it say,
files.
oh yeah.
So your experiment already has the FCS files in it, but I have you export the FCS files separately so that it plays well with third-party software. It's something I've kind of pulled over as a paranoia from BD, because the experiment specific FCS files sometimes are more friendly for the acquisition software, and they're
Got
not
it.
as friendly with those
Got
other
it.
software. So
Got
that's
it.
why I want you to use this specifically for your analysis. All right.
Perfect.
And now that you know all of that's there, what you can do is you can delete everything with the exception of the template. So once you make sure that everything's on your server, because we have so many people that use our instruments, we need to make sure that the data is taken off the instrument when you're done. And the end researcher is responsible for the data and making sure you have it. So I always want to make sure you have it at the end of your run, so that you don't come back in an hour and the system crashed and then the data's gone. That would break my heart. I don't want to see that. You put so much work into all of the stuff that you're doing. So let's make sure it's secure at the time of. Okay. So then what you would do is you just delete the experiment. You would delete all of that. Just leave the template on there so that you have it for easy access. Okay. And then here, you just load the tube of water and hit run. And then as that's running, you can delete that. And then I'll walk you through policies on when you would shut down versus when you wouldn't shut down and all that. Okay.
Okay, it's done.
It's done. Okay, perfect. So what winds up happening is Monday through Friday, if it's before 5 o'clock and not a holiday, after the water is done and after you run it, all you have to do is close out of the Site Expert software. It's going to ask if you want to turn it off. You say no, and you log out of Windows. So it's important that you log out of Windows. If you don't, we're going to think you're still using it, right?
And keep billing me for it.
So you go here. Yeah, keep billing you. We want to make sure you don't pay for time you're not using. So you come here and you just hit sign out, okay? If you forget, don't stress, and you remember the next day, just email me and let me know. We're not mean, we want to help people, so I don't want to charge anyone from time they're not using, and I think that would be a huge waste of resources, right? So just make sure, but be cognizant of it. So you sign out. If it's after 5 o'clock or any time at all on a holiday and weekend, which currently you don't have permissions for, but after you take the principles class, you will. You need to check iLab, and if anyone is on after you, you leave it on and send them an email. If no one's on after you, what you do is you turn off the instrument if it's after 5 o'clock or any time on the holiday and weekend. And just remember, if it's, say it's 9 o'clock at night and you had an appointment and you canceled at 8:50, you're still responsible for coming in and turning it off, because the person before you wouldn't know, right? Unless you had an arrangement with them or something like that, okay? That's pretty much it. Any of the policies that we have are on our website as far as billing and everything like that. So I want you to review it and just make sure you're comfortable with those. And, you know, so if you go to about the core and policies, it's all there. Okay. Also, it goes without saying, I trained you. You're wonderful. You can use the instrument. You can't train other people. People can kind of zoom in with you, right? Because it's a one person per instrument policy. We want to make sure you spray everything down. Everything's all good and ready to go for the next user. I'm getting ahead of myself. But you can have people kind of watch what you do remotely because it's the social distancing right now. But if anyone needs to get trained, just send them my way and I'll train them to give them access, okay? And we're more than happy, as long as people have funding and they have a need for flow, we will train them. We don't discriminate. So that's pretty much it. Be mindful that the time of scheduling and the time of actual log time will take the overlap, like we'll remove any overlap, but then we'll charge for whatever those time frames are. So if you booked from 1 to 2, but used from 1:30 to 2:30, you'll get charged from 1 to 2:30 because you had logged for that, you had scheduled for that time and that blocked the instrument. But you do have up until the time of the reservation to move it. So if you realize right before I'm going to be half hour late, you can move it. Okay. Or if you need to shorten the time or anything like that. Right. So that's pretty much it, unless you have any questions. Do you feel comfortable at this point running independently, or would you like another session?
No, I think with the YouTube video, I would be comfortable. I just
Okay.
have a question. So the next experiment I run will be using this Cy5 ester that I showed you.
Yep.
And it will be that, and that will be one of the colors. The other color will be GFP, and maybe I'll use a viability dye. So the
Okay.
same protocol will work, right? Just
Same
like
exact
start with the
protocol.
compensation, then apply the compensation onto your experiment, and
Yep.
it
And
should take
import
care
the
of it.
comp matrix and gains and just double check to make sure those gains carried over. And then you'll be fine. Yep.
Okay, I think the video will help because next time I'll just, since I can pull up YouTube here, I'll just play it on the side and watch it while I run my experiment.
Yeah, exactly. So you can have that going to the side. If you do have anything that pops up, you can go ahead and email that account. You know, it's now that we're pretty much all back in all the time and we're sorting all the time, our time to respond might be a little bit slower. You can also go ahead and if you see someone in the lab, you can say from a distance, we can't have someone come to be with you one-on-one, but you can say, hey, I'm having some issues. You know, I emailed the account. You know, and then they could reach out to me by my cell phone, and then, or whoever's available, and we can try and help you out.
Okay.
All right. So you're definitely
The
not
water is
alone.
done, by the way. Just
Okay.
FYI.
Perfect. Then all you have to do then here is just go ahead and hit close. You're going to close out. And it's going to ask you if you want to turn it off, and you're going to hit no. And then you're going to log out of Windows, and that's it.
Yay!
It
First
is,
experiment worked,
yes.
and I learned something. I learned so much, so it's awesome.
That's awesome. I'm really glad you're a fantastic user of flow cytometry. I'm really looking forward to seeing the data that you pull out. And don't be a stranger, please. I love seeing that people like to work with flow and working with them and anything you need.
Yeah, I will be bugging you in the future.
It'll be a pleasure.
Yay!
All right.
Thank you.
No problem, Shruti. And have a
All
wonderful
right.
weekend, okay?
You too. Bye. Thank
All
you
right.
so much,
Bye-bye.
Kathy. Have a
No
good one.
problem.
Bye.
You too. Bye.